are really going to go through the first 12 fast. I mean, one line, 2 lines tops, okay? And then we're going to dive into this. Yeah, we're going to start. You're going to start that, okay? And then just keep it really, really quick.
In the future, talk radio will actually educate, inspire, and make you think. The future is now. Topics and music that affect your life from Universal Broadcasting Network. Tune in at ubnradio.com.
Greetings and salutations, everyone. You have tuned in to Dr. Judy WTF, and I am your host, Walt Lusk, and Dr. Judy WTF is here in studio. And to let you know, what does the WTF stand for? Please don't get ahead of us here. What the Freud? We are going to be continuing our series, part 2 of Narcissistic Mothers, and I am very, very passionate about this today. And but first, we're going to do a quick review of the last week, which was the first 12, because there's 24 characteristics of being a narcissistic mom. And we're going to shrink that tune, a very popular song from Christina Aguilera. So I know Judy's got a lot to dive into today, as usual for now. She's going to an amazing symposium every Thursday at UCLA, one of her alma maters. So what's cooking, Dr. Judy? Oh, and by the way, this is a call-in show. You got to call in. Get on the couch with Dr. Judy, because if you know someone, it doesn't have to be your mom, who is a narcissist, I'm just going to give you a heads up, an emotional bully, which we're going to elaborate in the biggest way possible today. Get on the couch with us. We are fully interruptible, and we are here for you. Our website is drjudywtf.com. And you can email us at info@drjudywtf.com. And it is being sponsored by the Psychological Healing Center. And Dr. Judy is giving a radio special a 10% discount, already discounted rate of getting your life mind mapped. So go to drjudywtf.com and check it out.
Thank you. So you asked me what's cooking. And what's not cooking is brain neurons firing when we're not being properly attuned to. It's just not cooking. And when we don't get mirrored as human beings, then we start shutting down and we start disconnecting. And when we're disconnected, we can't think straight. We don't function well. We fall into what I call the hole in the soul. And at that point, we either start feeding that hole in the soul with basically drugs, sex, rock and roll, or some version of it, and it's endless. It's a bottomless pit, and at that point, people usually start breaking down. They start imploding and exploding. And so what I did is I created a mind map to track this process so that you guys don't have to be in therapy. If you wish to be in therapy, you don't have to be in therapy for years and years and years. And so I've shortened the process into a from through to model.
You've condensed it.
Yes, I did.
And basically what she's trying to say in English, folks, is, and we've had this show for a year, and I've been around Dr. Judy for longer than that. The amount of time that and what Judy is able to dive into and change your life is just radically quick and permanent. That's a bold statement, but it's true. Than what you're going to get from normal therapy. Does it work every time? Absolutely not. But if you've listened to our show that we just did, a 4-session series on Maria, the first one alone, you will see that her response from just the first time you were on air, she felt lighter and freer and got more out of our 4 sessions on air than she had with a lot of other therapies and more, quote, intense therapy. You're going to save a bundle of money and save your life by listening to what we're doing and check out what Judy's doing.
See, what happens to us is we get trapped in a kind of a psychological jail, and I refer to it as a double dungeon, because when our mothers fail us, when they fail to really provide for our emotional needs, and they fail to soothe us and attune to us and give us normalcy, consistency, and what I call unconditional love in behavioral form, which is eye contact, skin contact, breastfeeding, attunement, being there, being responsive to the baby, putting the baby first. When that all fails, and then when father's not able to rescue the situation and mitigate the damages and kind of step in and pick up the broken pieces, then what happens is that the child, the infant, does not learn how to regulate their emotions. And then this becomes the basis for insecure attachment, avoidant attachment, and even disorganized attachment. And that means, simply put, that the way we are attached to as infants is the way that we conduct our attachment, meaning our relationship, the people that we pick into our lives. That's how we conduct ourselves. And so my job is to play psychological detective, if you will, and undo the damaging past, and undo the core beliefs that are an outcome of the damaging past, and give people the opportunity to break out of their defense mechanisms and to have a new opportunity to reboot their lives. So that's pretty simply put, I hope, but you can translate it into English if you want.
In a more global scope.
Thank you.
In a more global scope, the preface to Judy's book that she's reading, she has the first words, which I put where? Right here, my fine filing system. We are born perfect and connected. We are then disconnected from and made imperfect. We can become connected and complete again. You can become connected and complete again. See, the whole preface of this show and Judy's book is healing human disconnect. And we believe that we as individuals, we as families, we with our spouses, our friends, our coworkers, even ourselves, are totally more disconnected today than we ever have been. And one of the reasons is because of this little smartphone that we seem to think we can't live without. Okay? I'm just going to read a couple quick paragraphs here from the preface of her book. The great poet Emerson holds a mirror up to the human race, and when the human race looks back at its own reflection, it's not a pretty sight. Disconnection between religions, nations, and social classes. Disconnections between mother and child, father and child, husband and wife, extended families, and our immediate community. With all of our technological advances, it seems as though not much has changed in our relationships over the centuries. As a matter of fact, it seems that as a human race, we have become more disconnected than in any time in human history. And we have, and she goes on, the isms. I mean, just turn on the news. I mean, you have rappers, and I'm really not going to get into this, but just one guy who was a rapper went and beheaded an American journalist for ISIS as a result of the shenanigans that are going on there. I mean, it's just getting absolutely out of hand and more disconnected of what's going on than ever, even though some feel that we might be more disconnected.
So, Walt, we have to start somewhere, and I intended the mind map actually to be a global project, which I'm going to tackle next, and that global project is going to be called Healing Global Disconnect. And in the meantime, how do we heal global disconnect? By becoming better parents, by offering our infants the nurturing that they need so that they have healthy human psyches and don't end up being patients. So that's where I'm putting my energy right now, and I'm really, really enjoying doing long-distance mind mapping. It is truly a treat for me to take people along a journey whereby they can actually track the wounds of their childhood, both the wounds from the mother and the father, and then track the reactions to the wound, and therefore track the outcome of it, which is usually a nasty core belief in the form of I'm worthless, I'm not good enough, I'm a failure, and there's lots of them. And then that core belief becomes the lever that our Achilles heel, basically, that then gets tripped up by other people.
Definitely a lever.
For
That's
sure, in
totally.
relationships, I do a lot of couples therapy, and couples trip each other up all the time, and then they go into chaos, and then they get defensive with each other, and they disconnect. And by the end of that game, they're either imploding or exploding or both, and it really isn't a pretty sight. And so, starting with why this is so, is because in order to have a healthy human psyche, we need attunement. And attunement is mirroring. And if we're not attuned to, then we can't give attunement. Okay, so that's the basis.
A lot of times we learn by example.
Right, and that's the basis of narcissism. So for those of you who think that narcissism means snobbery, oh, he's a narcissist, no, it means that the person who's exhibiting narcissistic traits such as demeaning and devaluing and destroying, okay, and putting themselves first in conversation or first in the line of importance, especially in the case of a parent to a child, when the mother is before the child, then that's pretty messed up, because that's just not the flow of things. It's child before mother. And when that dynamics happens,
It's
we're
child
in
before
trouble.
mother or mother before child?
It's the child first.
Well, it should be.
Right.
Right, but in narcissism, it's not.
It's not. It's
Right.
the reverse.
Yes.
Okay? And when I talk to my patients about narcissism and their mothers, they're telling me how painful it is when they're being interrupted, when they're not being heard, when they end up being the parent of the parent, and they're the parentified child. It's very, very painful, because it's almost like they don't have a mother.
And if you want to talk about this, I forgot to give the phone number out. It's area code 323-843-2826. And we are here standing by for you. 323-843-2826. So what I'm going to do here, Narcissism and Teleshow, now that I've talked about myself, why don't you talk about me?
That sums it up.
About sums it up. I'm going to go through just quickly. We have 24 characteristics, and we've got a lot of time. We have a lot of ground to cover in a short time. Just first 12, just as a quick recap. But if any of this makes sense or you're interested, please turn to last week's show. Everything she does is deniable. I mean, she's not going to take credit for anything. Second, she violates your boundaries. Third, she picks favorites. Dive in any time. She undermines is fourth. Fifth, she demeans, criticizes, and disintegrates. And this is really huge. I mean, it's always about me and me making look good.
Disengages? Or what was that word?
Disengages. Yeah.
Disengages.
Okay. Narcissistic mothers continuing. Number 6 is she makes you look crazy because she didn't do it. What were you thinking? You know, you have a very vivid imagination. She's very, very envious. She's a liar in too many ways to count. Number 8, she has to be the center of attention. They love drama. 10 is she manipulates your emotions in order to feed on your pain. Number 11, she's very selfish and willful. She can't handle the word no in any way, shape, or form. She's extremely self-absorbed. That's the 12th. So now we're going to dive into the 13th and beyond of narcissistic mothers.
And for those of you who didn't listen to the episode before, you can tune in on Stitcher, iTunes, and grab that information. And this is just a continuation of that information. I've been receiving a lot of emails about it, and people writing in saying, I think I'm married to a narcissist. And hey, you have an interesting story around that.
I
don't
do.
you?
I have a real good friend
really
who's a
shocked
real
about
fan
your
of.
story.
I was blown away. I have
Yeah.
a real good friend of mine who is very interested in our show and a big fan. And I was talking to her about narcissism, and she says, well, can you send me your notes? And so we did a show earlier in the year on narcissism, and I encourage you to check that out. I have had friends say that, my God, that's my ex-husband, that's my husband to a T, and they didn't even know it. So I sent these notes to a friend of mine, and she sent it to a friend of hers who's having issues with her husband. And she read them and was totally blown away, and it fit her husband to a T. And as a result, she's going to divorce her husband just because she realizes this guy's too much of a narcissist. She can't handle it, and it's just too much. So, you know, that's not the intent of what we're trying to accomplish, the intent of our
No.
show. But Spit happens, as it used to say in my daughter's bib.
Yeah, well, if you are married to a narcissist or you suspect that you're married to a narcissist, then you don't have to divorce.
No.
You do have to heal, though, and you do have to set boundaries. And one of the ways that I work with people is I teach them the Peaceful Healing Dialogue. And if any one of you wants a copy of the Peaceful Healing Dialogue,
You can email us at info@drjudywtf.com.
I'll be happy to send it to you.
Yeah, it's all on one page.
And the Peaceful Healing Dialogue is really about reconnecting, because the whole premise of what I do is teaching people how to reconnect and heal the wounds of the past. And when you have a narcissistic mother, then you have a lot of wounds from the past. And why we call the show Dr. Judy WTF with the Freud is because we honor Freud and his repetition compulsion, which really brilliantly describes how we go into past patterns and repeat them, and I call that the WTF. It's kind of like I'll turn to my patients and say, WTF is happening here, and they'll know that what I'm meaning is that they're repeating a pattern. And so these patterns get repeated because the wish is that we do a better job, that we create a happier ending, so that we run through this system over and over again, hoping that we'll come out of this dark tunnel into the light. But the problem is that oftentimes who we're asking to heal us is somebody who's really injured. So that doesn't mean that two injured people can't come to therapy and heal themselves, because we know, especially from Dr. Stan Tatkin, that relationships heal, that we are wired to connect, we are wired for love.
And we did a show on that, Wired for Love, and Stan
definitely,
was in studio.
We definitely did. So if you are married to a narcissist, if you suspect that you are a narcissist, that simply means you've been narcissistically injured, you're acting out this way, you're putting yourself into this important position because you don't feel important. And the reason you don't feel important is it's not your fault. You don't feel important because your mother communicated to you in some way, shape, and form that you were not important enough and that she was more important than you. So this is the basis of this particular personality disorder.
And you're very, very important to us. Every single one of you. Our listenership is growing like crazy. iTunes is just growing like a weed, pulling from iTunes. And assuming you listen to us live, you can call us at 323-843-2826.
And we really love call-ins.
Absolutely.
And just challenge us,
We
because
respond
we're here.
to any and
Pick our
every
brain.
comment that we get.
Right. Yeah.
So moving on to the 13th cause of an issue with narcissistic mothers is she is insanely defensive and extremely sensitive to any criticism. She will explode with fury, threaten, storm, rage, destroy, and may become violent, beating, confining, and putting her child outdoors just because you've criticized her. They can't handle it at all.
Okay.
And that's what I'm talking about, being an emotional bully.
All right, so I want to elaborate on that a little bit, because criticism is not taken as feedback, okay? And nobody likes to be criticized. And number one, there's a way of giving people feedback that's not critical. It's called self-reflect, self-correct. Give people feedback without blaming, shaming, criticizing, judging. And that's a skill, and that's why the Peaceful Healing Dialogue is so effective, because it teaches people how to do that without blowing up the bond between them. But in the case of narcissism, they're so thin-skinned when it comes to the core of the self, because the core of the self has been injured, and so now there's such a protective shell around it that anything could be construed as a criticism. Even a look that may be intended to just be a look can be construed as, why are you looking at me that way? So there's a little bit of paranoia
even when you're not
in that, even when you're not.
Yeah.
But rather than it being just a state of paranoia, now it becomes more of a, hey, are you not seeing me as perfect? And because they don't see themselves as perfect and they puff up to appear perfect, then if if they think that they're being infringed upon that way, then they will really, really blow up on you about this.
And the next one, number 14, she terrorizes, which again, in my view, is being an emotional bully. And she uses fear, okay? Intimidation. Fear is a powerful means to control the victim, okay? Beware of their wrath, okay? So you have to be careful that you don't piss them off and endure their wrath, and therefore you're afraid. Not all narcissistics abuse, but when they do, it's sometimes and mostly very, very subtle, so they can deny it if they have to.
Right. So they're clever. There's a
Very
very
clever.
intelligent defense mechanism going on here,
Yes.
and they appear to be bullies. What was the first line that you said about them in that particular
For
example?
all uses, fear is a very powerful means of control.
Right, and that's a kind of that is a projection, because they themselves are scared to be
death.
exposed,
Scared to death.
as phonies, because the core of narcissism is that there is no real strong sense of self. So they build up a false sense of self, and they don't want to be busted in this game. So what they do is they intimidate, and so you keep away from the self, and you don't challenge the self, you don't criticize the self. So you're always worried about your own self.
Yes.
And so that keeps
Everything in them in
yeah,
check.
that
But
keeps it away from them.
Remember that, folks. She said narcissists have a very false sense of self. Let me tell you, I had a friend of mine, when she was married, her husband even took his T-shirts, his underwear, and got it pressed. Okay? And I looked at that as, everything had to be perfect, even stuff that nobody saw, because it's his armor, right? In reality, the emperor has no clothes.
And
It's
that's
all
what they're protecting.
A facade.
Right.
It's a fake.
Yeah.
It's just fake.
Yeah, and we talked last time about how they live at the plastic surgeon's office,
Yeah,
and we all
Botox.
like to be beautiful, and there's a point at which it just goes overboard. I remember when I started counseling people, I didn't even have a master's degree. I ran a stop smoking clinic at the time, and weight control clinic at the time, and a young woman came to see me, and she actually was a Playboy centerfold, and she was a prostitute, and she was bulimic and sometimes anorexic, mostly bulimic, and she smoked, and she had all kinds of issues. And
Issues.
she inspired, because she kept saying, "Can't you treat me? Can't you treat me?" And I said, "No, I can't, because I'm not licensed. I'm licensed to help you quit smoking. I'm licensed to help you with your, with your diet and behaviors. But no, I don't do the dynamics work." And then I thought, why can't I do the dynamics work? And then I started picking up the educational speed and going back to school, etc. But the point is that this beautiful, beautiful woman had such a fragile sense of self. And of course, her sense of self was so wrapped up in her looks. And she started doing plastic surgery. First, she fixed her already perfect nose. And then she started, believe it or not, sucking a little bit of fat out of her knees, because she felt that her knees were not perfect. And she literally started picking on every single part of her body. And of course, the more she did that, the less natural she looked. And this beautiful woman started ruining herself.
If you want to learn more about that, there's a book that was written in the early 60s called, by Maxwell Maltz, called Cybernetics. It's actually one of the foundational books of the self-help industry, which of course has been going on for over 50 years. And a much easier read is one that was re-edited by Dan Kennedy called Cybernetics. And the gist of it was just that. He was a very innovative plastic surgeon in New York, and went to Germany to learn plastic surgery in the 50s and 60s, and he'd do this amazing work on women like that.
Yeah.
And they'd put a mirror up to them and go, "Hey, isn't your nose beautiful?" And they would say, "I can't tell the difference."
And you know what's sad? It's absolutely so. And you know what's sad is that, well, what I work with is perceptual misperceptions. Okay, misperceptions. Okay, the lens of the view of the world is cracked the lens of the view of the self is cracked.
Absolutely.
So the narcissistically injured person has no real sense of self. So they don't have a good take on who they are, how they look. And so no matter what they do,
No
it's
self-esteem.
never
It's never
good
enough. Never good
enough.
Mm-mm.
And so no amount of plastic surgery is good enough. And you know what's really a shame is that plastic surgeons don't all demand that people who go overboard with their plastic
Right.
surgery procedures see a psychologist first so
Yeah.
that these issues can be dealt with on the couch, not under the knife.
And Maxwell Maltz realized, and that's how he wrote the book Cybernetics, is it really was more of an inside job than an outside job.
Right.
And he started, trying to fix the outside, and it didn't matter. He'd do a great cleft palate, and a kid would be just thrilled and change their life. But do a nose job or something like that on a beautiful person didn't have any impact.
And the thing
Many
about
times.
this, if we go back to cause, which is where I always like to look, is what's the cause of all of this? You see that the mother of the person who's narcissistically injured also was narcissistically injured,
Right.
of course, and this is
Multi-generational.
multi-generational. And what happens is that the child becomes this little mini-me, and becomes a mirror for the mother of who she needs her child to be. And the child never gets a sense of independence and who she is, because she has to be a reflection of who her mother wants her to be. So there's no reinforcement for being. They're not loved just because they're who they are. They're loved because they're now a reflection of who the mother needs to be. So guess what happens? Instead of the mother attuning to them, right?
He tuned himself.
The child is now supposed to attune to the mother.
We're gonna get to that.
That's
Yeah,
okay.
we're gonna get to that.
Okay.
So again, you're tuning into Dr. Judy WTF. That's What the Freud.
And attuning into.
And tuning into Dr. Judy WTF. And you can catch us at drjudywtf.com. And we are on UBN Radio, and you can catch us podcast on Stitcher and iTunes. And I'm your host,
and
Walt
we
Lusk, and
want
we're in
to-
studio with Dr. Judy Rosenberg.
Thank you. We want to attune into you.
Yes.
So please feel free to call in. We really, truly love
Yeah,
calling.
and our telephone number is area code 323-843-2826, 323-843-2826. And the next, number 16 of, number 15. We got to keep it going here. She is infantile and very petty. In other words, she's very simply childish. She's tries to get even, for example, if you do her wrong. She's just more of acting like a very selfish little child than anything else. And I'd say no to them, and they get really upset, as we've said.
Well, this childish quality is all about the fact that, again, they don't have a very developed sense of self, and the pettiness is that they don't have a very developed sense of self.
They don't. It's all a
And
facade.
so they don't really get reinforced from their family of origin to go inward and work on the inner core, because it's all about being pretty or being successful
Or having the appearance of,
right,
which is
right.
one of my things. Appearance of being successful.
Right.
The appearance of being pretty. What other people think is really important.
Very much so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
She's aggressive and shameless. She doesn't ask, she demands. Okay? And she manipulates you until you give in to her demands.
Because again, you are an extension of her needs. And if you don't, you're there simply to meet her needs. And if you're not meeting her needs, you're dismissed. It's that simple.
That's it. You're dismissed. I don't need you and phooey on you. And again, it's all about them. She parentifies, and Judy's hit on this. She sheds her responsibility to you as a child as soon as she was able, leaving you to take care of yourself as best you could. Best example is you hit 16 years old, you go get a job, right? And you're in school, and of course the goal of a parent is to provide for clothes and food and, the important necessities of life at that point. But wait, there's more. As soon as you get a job, every request for school supply and clothing or toiletries is met with, well, now that you're making money, why don't you pay for them yourself? She's, again, trying to distance herself from the responsibilities, financial or otherwise, of being a parent. Right?
Well, the maternal instinct of a narcissist isn't really high. So, of course, the minute she has an opportunity to say goodbye to her parental role and be free of it, and not have to invest any longer emotionally or financially or any which way, and she could take back that investment and, of course, invest in herself, the better. Sooner the better.
Well, here's a line at the end of this one. As you get older, she directly placed responsibility for her welfare and her emotions on you, weeping on your shoulder and unloading on any time something went awry for her.
Using
again,
you as a counselor.
User's counselor,
Right.
and her, all of a sudden, she's the
Right.
victim,
Right.
right? Playing the victim.
Mm-hmm.
Number 18 of narcissistic mothers of the 24 is she's exploitive. She will manipulate to get work, money, or objects she envies out of other people for nothing. Okay, she's made an agreement with you. If it was violated, the minute it no longer serves her needs. Okay, like for example, I've got a friend who is threatening to get a restraining order against her ex-husband because he's a narcissist, and all of a sudden it didn't suit his needs that he needed to pay for her health insurance. So guess what? He says, you know what? We've decided that, and that means that she and he. I don't need to pay for your health insurance anymore.
And you know what's really interesting?
It's whatever suits him
Right.
is now unilaterally changed in a heartbeat.
Yeah, and that's perfectly right on the money, literally, in this case. They make unilateral decisions.
They make unilateral decisions.
They don't know how to do panel 7. If you would put the mind map up for a moment.
You can catch the mind map at drjudywtf.com.
Right. And what I mean by panel number, they don't know how to do panel 7, which is the panel of interconnection.
Yeah,
they don't know how to have relationships, but they do know how to do panel number 5, of course, because they're very individualistic. They don't know how to share. Okay, if you look at
sharing.
panel
No,
number
it's not in
5
their
is the
DNA.
not sharing panel.
Yeah,
Okay,
sharing is not in their DNA.
because it's kind of like me. Panel 5 is, I use these panels very metaphorically, and panel 5 is typically used as a defense mechanism, and it is a defense mechanism.
Absolutely,
it's a narcissistic defense. They don't know how to share because in their mind, sharing means that they're going to have to give up a piece of themselves, or maybe a
Yep.
part of their money, or part of something,
Yep.
or part of their
Yep.
time.
Yep.
And
Yep.
that is precious. And the injury behind it, let's not forget that the injury behind it is that they didn't get enough. So because they didn't get enough, they don't have a lot to give. And so they'll hoard the love, they'll hoard the money, they'll hoard the attention.
It
And so,
doesn't matter how much they have. They could have millions in the bank.
right.
It's never enough.
That's right.
It's never enough. Right? So number 19 is she projects. Okay? For example, she makes outrageous requests and casually refuses to let her have her way. She enraged by your refusal and snarls at you, and then you'll talk about it when you've calmed down and are no longer hysterical. So, she, whatever she's at, she's going to project onto what's going on.
Right, and again, you are an extension of who she needs you to be, and oftentimes people will say, God, I was treated like a little servant, and
Yes.
there's this sense of lack of empathy. That's a big one, okay? So because she lacks empathy, she has no idea of her impact, she or he, if it's a narcissist, no idea of the impact on another human being. So there's just an assumption of a very, very egocentric world. They are the sun, the moon, the stars. World revolves around them. And so they're
Morning,
shocked.
noon, and night.
They're shocked when the subject doesn't revolve around them. And they get bored when the subject doesn't revolve around them, and they'll try to change the subject to pull it back to them. And as we talked about in the earlier episode, they will try to top your story with their story because they need to be the center of attention.
I gave an example before of a friend who was learning calisthenics and could do 20 push-ups. And her boyfriend said, well, what's the big deal? I can do 200 one-handed push-ups.
Ah.
So, in other words, instead of encouraging her and saying, "Hey, that's awesome, let's work on your technique next week maybe you can work on 30," encouraging her to do better, all of a sudden it was an incredible one-upsmanship. So it wasn't even the fact that, he could do 20 one-handed, he could do 200 one-handed.
And what's sad is that they don't realize that they're so disconnecting
No,
from
they
the
don't.
other person that eventually narcissists are left and they die alone
Yeah, they
because
do.
no one feels included in their life, truly. No one feels
they've
mirrored.
pushed them all away.
They've been pushed away. I remember treating an older woman when I first started interning. It was a really interesting case. She was a wonderful woman. She was like one of these Hollywood songwriter people, really elegant and very intelligent. And she came in, the first thing she did was she trashed me. "You're a novice. You don't know what you're talking about. Your furniture looks like crap.
Your credibility.
Blah, 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 blah." And I started thinking, wow, my core beliefs were being activated. Maybe I'm not that smart. Maybe I'm not that good at what I do. And then I stopped and I made this intervention. I said to her, "Is this how you treat everybody?" She looked at me and she just knew that I was on her.
She got
And
discovered. She'd been had.
stopped, and she said, "Yeah." And I said, "Okay. Now I know why you're here."
Yep,
And
that-
I did it in a way where she felt my empathy, and it was really challenging for me to draw on my empathy because, of course, my first impulse was to defend myself. My first impulse was to hate her, and we ended up having a very tumultuous relationship whereby she'd love me, she'd hate me, she'd love me, she'd demean me, she'd devalue me, she'd get hurt if I didn't move my car out of the parking spot so that she could park
she got
there.
primo
Right,
parking.
primo parking, and we just went on and on about this, and she ultimately got very fascinated with what I was saying. She became interested in herself, started taping the sessions, and
Wow.
I think that it was very interesting because I think I became meaningful to her, which
Sure,
oftentimes people do not become meaningful to the
one
narcissist.
One of the ways to do that is not only be interested, but to be interesting, and there's a difference.
Right, and relationships heal. So my point about that is that although you may have a tendency to hate the narcissist, there's a very injured child in there, and if you can extend beyond that and have empathy, yet boundaries. I'm not saying
Yeah,
let them
gotta
push
have
you
boundaries.
over.
Definitely have
Empathy and really understand the depth of the injury, then you can become less reactive to them and less hateful.
And another way that they're an emotional bully, and number 20, is she is never wrong about anything. Okay? She won't genuinely apologize for a thing because she's not wrong.
So there's this concept that to be wrong is to be
Inferior.
bad and inferior.
Yeah.
So again, you can see the defense mechanism. There's no ability to self-reflect and ponder and step back from the self, because there is no self, right? You can't step back from something that you don't have. And really take inventory and think.
I mean, you sit there and try and point it out, and she's going to go, "You're crazy." Right? In other words,
Right.
now it's all about you
Right.
and not her, but, it is about her.
Yes.
And again, a lot of these obviously can apply to men as well. I mean, 75% of all narcissists are men, but, the foundation.
75%?
Yeah. But, it all starts with, mother-child issues. So, hence
And
moms.
I just also wanted to say it's not a black and white thing.
No, it's not.
It's not all or none. I'm a narcissist. I'm not a narcissist. We all have narcissistic qualities. We all want to be the center of attention on some level. We want to be rich, famous, beautiful, whatever it is. If we think that we're completely free of narcissism, check in with your ego. It's just not true. Even if you think that, for example, you're a really spiritual person and you don't really care about material objects, maybe you take pride that you meditate better or chant better or whatever. And this is not to demean, devalue, and destroy people who follow paths, but to understand that we're human beings, and we will very often express our narcissism in ways that we don't even catch it.
No, we don't. And they don't
My
even know they're
religion
doing
is
it.
better than your religion.
yeah.
My practice is better than your practice. My school's better than your school. You get the drift.
Yeah, and remember what ego stands for: edging God out. Number 21, she seems to have no awareness of other people or their feelings. She's oblivious. Again, we've talked about massive lack of empathy. Okay, she never occurred to her to think about anybody else's feelings. So we've hit that one pretty hard. She blames. Okay, again, she's not taking responsibility for a thing. They blames you for everything that isn't right about her life. Okay,
And that's the fingers pointing out. It's your fault. They use the word you, because they have to keep it off of themselves because they're so delicate, they're so hurt inside that the blaming keeps them protected from you blaming them.
They don't want to take
And so they're-
responsibility.
Right. Now your eye is on, what did I do wrong? So you never question what they're doing. It's all, if they're successful, they trigger your core belief that there's something wrong with me, and so that keeps them safe, and you never question what's wrong with them.
What's interesting is in this article, and this was really, really telling to me, is really potent, Judy, they are multitasking. Okay, they're really good at multitasking. They're simultaneously, and there's 7 things that they can do in this example, multitasking simultaneously. They lie, they're going to manipulate, they're selfish, they're blaming, they're projecting, they're putting on self-pitying drama, and they might be parentifying. In other words, trying to eliminate themselves as a parent. So they're doing all this at the same time. It's a lot of work.
Well, that's better than a juggler.
Absolutely it is. But again, it's all about them, and they're going to do anything and everything they possibly can to protect their fragile and facade of a non-existent ego.
So see how busy they are?
They are
They've got to
incredibly
do all
busy.
of their,
They
they're
gotta
putting
do-
a
they
lot of
gotta-
energy into this dysfunctional
Amazing
system.
amount of
Yeah.
energy. Amazing amount of energy. We got a couple more here, and then we got to scoot. She destroys your relationships. Okay? Families are torn apart. She's like a tornado. Okay? They really can't have you having other friends because then you're taking your attention off her.
That's right.
Right? Right?
Yeah.
So favoritism, gossip, it doesn't matter. Anything that they can pull to destroy a family, they're going to do. It's like, she's a spider in the middle of the family web. She's got to know everything and know what's going on. And not only is she constantly monitoring it, but she's trying to control it all.
Right. And that pretty much sums up what it feels like to be around a narcissist, right? You don't feel very important. At the end of that journey, who are you in the picture? Non-existent, pretty much.
Let me touch on that real quick at the end. The last resort, she's going to go pathetic. In other words, when she's confronted with unavoidable consequences of her own bad behavior, she's going to melt into a soggy puddle, weepy helplessness, and it's all her fault. Okay? She can't do anything right. She feels bad, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
So that you can step in, rescue her, make her feel better. And again,
Make her
there's
feel
no ability to self-reflect and self-correct. So instead of self-reflection, there's self-pity. And there's a world of difference between pitying oneself and being a victim versus really looking internally, becoming introspective, not victimish, if you will. And they don't have the capacity to do
They
that.
don't.
Right.
Now, lastly, I want to get your opinion on this, Dr. Judy, and then we're going to have to go to our Shrink That Tune. We really, as a result of dealing with a narcissist, ultimately, in this article, and see if you agree, we have no real obligation. Okay? In other words, if you don't owe your parents love if they're treating you like dirt. Okay? You don't owe your parents respect if they don't respect you. You don't owe them obedience if they're making demands that just are very harmful. And then there's a lot about, if they're not gratitude and having no sense of gratitude for you as a person, for what you're doing and all that, you absolutely don't owe them anything, and especially you don't owe them grandchildren.
And what's really interesting and motivational is that narcissistic parents are often very, very difficult to have empathy for. So as they grow older,
we
the
talked about this.
children will most likely not come visit them very often, and they won't be able to muster up helping them with their physical ailments, and they usually end up in old age homes because they didn't give empathy, so now the child has the grown child, whatever child, has no ability to empathize for the parent. And so basically they are cutting their own throat in the process of their defense mechanism. And that's why it's so important for people with these disorders to seek help, because ultimately the soul wants to be connected.
But
Under all of that, they're still lonely, they're still hurting, there's still a soul. And so that has to be really, really the center of the focus of the treatment.
yes, it does. And if you have some comments, queries, questions, or concerns regarding narcissism parent or otherwise, you can contact us at info at drjudywtf.com. And if you have any requests for a song to shrink, we've had a lot of fun with a lot of them. We're going to do one now by Christina Aguilera called Vanity. And it's a little long, but it's kind of interesting. And then we're going to, of course, play the song.
Skip the repeats. And
I do skip the repeats. I'm not cocky. I just love myself, bitch. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the flyest bitch of them all? Never mind, I am that bitch, so flippin' pretty. Yeah, I am. If I were her, I would kiss me. Mirror, mirror on the wall, hit up Prince Charming. Tell him to give me a call. Tell him, never mind, screw him, 'cause I found somebody better. I'll make myself so much wetter.
Well, here's a person who didn't get a lot of mirroring, so there's a lot of mirror, mirror
Well,
on the wall.
they're looking in the mirror, though.
And there's a lot of I words, and it's I'm pretty, just screw off if you don't like me. There's not a sense of a relationship here at all. And there's the center of attention, and it's all about she's in love with herself because she's not. Okay.
There it is. Oh, that's okay. Great.
Right.
Every day I see myself, I love me even more. It's me I adore. Ain't nobody got shit on me. I'm the best for sure. 'Cause Cherie Amore.
So if somebody has to puff that hard, right, and say, me, I'm so great, I'm the best for sure, then what do you think they're feeling inside?
Totally the opposite.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that's the narcissistic defense right here.
Yeah, yes, indeed. V is for vanity. Every time I look at me, I turn myself on. V is for vanity. Thank you, Mom and Daddy, cause I turn myself on. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the sexiest one of all? Never mind, I am.
So thank you, Mom and Dad, because I turned myself on. And this is almost like, to me, a sarcastic comment. Like, thanks to you, Mom, I'm in my own world. I do everything for me. I turn myself on. In other words, I don't even need a relationship to have sex.
Yeah, I'm complete.
I'm my own world.
Yeah, I'm my own world.
Because I had to be my own world because there was nobody there for me. So remember the injury.
Well, mirror, mirror on the wall, they call me stuck up, but I'm not at all. Never mind, I am. It's not my fault. I'm the shit. Yeah, I am. I'm a badass bitch.
Yeah, it's not her fault. Remember, we are not the cause of part one of our lives. Okay, so there's a slim recognition here. But yet she goes back to the narcissistic defense and says, yeah, but, I'm still great.
I'm the bomb.
Right.
Every day I see myself, I love myself even more. Ain't nobody got shit on me. I'm the best for sure. Are you ready for me? No regrets. Get into it. No apologies.
Right, because she doesn't need any self-reflection here because she's perfect. There's no regrets, no apologies because she doesn't want to look inward at all.
Well, here's one. And now I take myself to be my lawful, wedded bitch.
Right. Narcissists are in love with themselves.
That's it.
Right? They stare into the mirror and they reflect back upon themselves because they weren't mirrored. That's why they need the mirror.
Well, you know what? All the girls say, yeah, I'm vain. So what? So what? All the boys say, yeah, I'm vain. So what? So what? All the girls say, yeah, we're vain. So what? So what? Everybody say, yeah, we're vain. And what? Woohoo.
So now we live in a culture of narcissism. okay, and everybody's vain, so it's almost like boilerplate. This is the way it is, and so look around.
Deal with it.
Deal with it.
Yeah. If the shoe fits, wear it. Read my lips. I'm a vain bitch. Can't love no one else. Love yourself. If they don't like it, tell them, get in line, and kiss your ass, bitch.
So there's the pain part here. Can't love no one else because they don't have empathy, right? But they can love themselves, but they really don't love themselves. And in order to prove to people that they do love themselves, they're saying, get in line, bitch. And that's supposed to let people know that they're important and that they love themselves.
Yes.
When they don't love themselves.
Yeah. So, love you, baby, au revoir. That's right. Let's go out like this. Again, mirror, mirror on the wall. Who's the flyest of them all? It's me. Bow down. Get on your knees. Where's my queens? Who reigns supreme? Let me hear you scream. And the longevity lives on, going strong. Let us not forget who owns the throne.
Right. The queen. The queen. The queen owns the throne. And the legacy lives on, meaning that it's multi-generational. And look at the last line. You do,
mommy.
Wow.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
after all of this, there's a recognition that who's the narcissist is
Mom. She learned it honestly, as I say. Well, folks, that's our show today. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening. Again, you can catch us on iTunes and Stitcher or drjudywtf.com. You can catch us, and I am your host, Walt Lusk. Dr. Judy Rosenberg as an amazing offer to mind map your life on a really amazing discounted basis. It really will change your life. And you can find that at drjudywtf.com. So next week, tune in. We'll do some more, and hopefully you'll call in and tell us some more. So now we're going to play the song Vanity by Christina Aguilera. And take